Hey guys, this video is going to go over ratios, rates, and proportions. Please make sure you take notes in your packet. Alright, so our first vocab word that we're going to talk about is a ratio. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities using division. So an example of that would be if I was going to compare how many boys are in my class and how many girls. And let's say I tell you that I have 12 boys in my class and I have 13 girls in my class. Okay, all a ratio is if I compare those two quantities using division. So I'm going to just throw a division line in here. So basically, I just wrote a ratio. It's saying I have 12 boys divided by or compared to 12 girls. Now, there are different ways, 3 ways that you can write a ratio. One way to write a ratio is as a fraction. So I wrote 12 boys over 13 girls. Another way you can write a ratio is by using the word 2. So I can say 12 boys compared to 13 girls. All right, so I use that word 2 right here. The third way to write a ratio is using a colon. So I might say I'm comparing my 12 girls, or 12 boys, to my 13 girls. And I'll use a colon. That's the symbol right here. So these are the 3 ways to write a ratio. So again, there's 3 ways to write a ratio. Again, you can write it as a fraction. If I was comparing 3 to 4, you can write it with the word 2, 3 to 4. Or you can write it with a colon, 3 to 4. And all I'm doing is comparing these two numbers using division. All right, so here is an example of some questions you might see with writing ratios. So my first question says, what is the ratio of green fish to orange fish? Well, I'll start by counting my green fish. So it looks like I have 1, 2 green fish. And then my orange fish, it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 orange fish. So if it asks me for a ratio of green fish to orange fish, you need to make sure you list what they ask for first. So it says green fish to orange fish. Well, I have 2 green fish, so I'll write 2. I'll just use a colon. Compared to my orange fish, there are 5. There is my ratio, 2 to 5. You could also write it like this, 2 to 5, or you could use the word 2. So there is the ratio of green to orange. Now, I might ask you a little bit different. I might say, what's the ratio of orange fish to green fish? In this case, you'd want to put the orange fish first. So I'll put 5 compared to 2. Or I'll write 5 as a fraction over 2. And then the last one asks, what about the ratio of orange fish to total fish? Well, I know there are 5 orange fish. I'll write this one as a fraction. And total fish, if I counted all of those, there are 7. So I'd write 5 to 7. So that is a ratio. It compares two quantities. So I compared my 2 colored fishes using division. And remember, this line can mean divide. All right, so the next vocab word that we're going to talk about is a rate. A rate is a ratio, so same as what we were just working with, a ratio that compares two quantities, but this time it's measured in different units. So that's the key word. It has to be in different units. So before, when we were writing ratios, we were comparing things that were the same units, like we were comparing fish to fish. Okay, that's a ratio. We were comparing boys to boys, anything like that. Now a rate is 2 different units. So if you take a look at this example down below, it says on average the Hulk eats 63 feet of Subway sandwiches every week. There are 2 different quantities or 2 different units here. We're working with 63 feet of Subway and weeks. Those are 2 different units. So I could write that as a ratio. I could write he eats 63 feet in 1 week. All right, so what I just wrote, that's a ratio, but more specifically, it's a rate because it's 2 different units. I'm working with feet and I'm working with weeks. So let's take a look at some problems, and I want to see if you can determine if these are rates or ratios. So if you can pause the video, and for each of these, write down whether you think it's a ratio or a rate. When you're ready to see the answers, push play. All right, the first one, we have 5 pounds compared to $2. So first thing, hopefully you noticed these were 2 different units. So this would be a rate. So this first one is a rate, which is also a ratio, but more specifically, it's a rate. The second one, I'm comparing dollars to dollars. So that is a ratio. Okay, it's the same unit. The third one, I'm comparing 2 feet to 3 feet. So again, that's a ratio because it's the same unit. The next one, I am comparing minutes to miles. Those are two different units, so it is a rate. And then the last one, I have $2 per apple. So I see dollars and I see apples. Those are two different quantities, so this is also a rate. All right, so the next thing we're going to be talking about is a proportion. A proportion is a statement that says that two ratios are equal. It's kind of like thinking about equivalent fractions. So if I would set this up 1/2 and say, well, that's equal to 4/8, this is actually a proportion, okay, with just numbers. So I might tell you that I'm charging $10 for one shirt. So I'll even put $10 for one t-shirt. I just set up a rate, okay? Now, I want to know if I'm charging at this constant rate, how much will it cost for 5 t-shirts? So what I can do is I can set up, basically it's kind of like an equation or a statement that says it's $10 for one shirt. How much will it cost for not one shirt, but for 5 shirts? So instead of a denominator of 1, I want it to be 5. And I don't know how much it's going to cost. Notice how I kept the t-shirts lined up across from each other, and the money is going to be lined up across from each other. Now, there's many ways to solve proportions like this, but I will just show you one way. So you can kind of think like this. Well, how do I get from one shirt to 5 shirts? Well, it's 5 times as many, right? So I need to do 5 times the price. So 10 times 5, that would be $50. So it will cost me $50 for 5 shirts. What I just set up, this whole thing together here, this is called a proportion. It's got an equal sign, and it's saying that two ratios, these two ratios or two rates, are equal to each other. Tomorrow in class, we're going to talk more about setting up proportions, but for now, just know that a proportion is just a statement saying that these two ratios that we set up are equivalent or equal to each other. Our next word that we're going to talk about is a unit rate. Now, you've heard of these before. So a unit rate is a rate that compares a quantity to one unit of another quantity. So again, you have to have two different units of measure, and basically another way to think about this is it has to be per one of something. So I might tell you that it costs $2.50 for 1 pound of meat. That is a unit rate. Again, it's a rate because it's two different quantities. I have dollars and pounds, and it's per 1 pound. So this 1 always has to be the denominator. So another way to write one could be I get 15 miles per 1 gallon of gas. This would be a unit rate because it's two different units, miles and gallons, and the denominator is 1. I'm going 15 miles per 1 gallon. Okay, this would not be a unit rate. I might say it costs $4 for 3 pounds of grapes. That is not a unit rate. This would be a rate because there's two different quantities, but it's not per 1, it's per 3 pounds. So this would not be a unit rate. So we have this problem here. It says it costs $9.60 for 4 pounds of zucchini. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write this as a ratio or as a rate. It costs $9.60 for 4 pounds of zucchini. I'm going to write that as a fraction using my division bar. All right, I want to change this to a unit rate. Now remember, unit rate means per 1 of something. Right now, this is not per 1. This is per 4 pounds. I want to know how much will it cost for 1 pound. So to change this to a unit rate, I'm going to set up a proportion. Remember, a proportion is a statement saying that two rates or ratios are equivalent. So I have an equal sign, and I want to come up with another ratio or rate that's equal to the one I just wrote. But instead of 4 pounds, I want it to say, well, how much does it cost for 1 pound? So you can kind of think of this like equal fractions, equivalent fractions. So think, well, how do you get from 4 to 1? Well, that's divided by 4. So I need to divide 960 divided by 4 so I can find out what it costs for just 1 pound. Now, if I divide that out on my calculator, I end up with 2.4. Now, this is money, so I need to add a 0 here. So it ends up costing $2.40 for 1 pound. So my unit rate would be $2.40 for 1 pound. Now, you could also write that a couple other ways, but I'll just leave it like that as a fraction. So I just changed that to a unit rate. So please make sure you complete the note sheet And then come with any questions that you may have to class tomorrow, and we will talk more about rates, ratios, and proportions tomorrow in class.